Imagine this, a whole month where not a single word could escape your lips. No explanations, no defense, not even the comfort of sharing a story. It sounds simple, but can you picture it? We're about to delve into a Buddhist secret that unveils the mysterious power of silence. What would happen if we stopped talking for so long? Would silence be peaceful, or would it awaken a storm within us, revealing things we've kept buried, emotions left unchecked? This is a story not just of quietness, but of transformation. A journey that shows why silence is so much more than the absence of sound, and why, deep down, it's something so many of us resist. There's something almost magnetic, maybe even a little frightening, about true silence. We all hear that silence is golden, but why? And does it really have the power to transform our lives? Some say that in quieting our voices, we open a gateway within, a portal to self-understanding that words often bury. What if silence didn't just make us calm, but revealed truths we've been running from? Today, we're diving into a story of one person's struggle with silence, an ancient tale with lessons that still resonate today, one that just might make you think twice about the power of quiet in your own life. Let's uncover the mystery together. In a quiet, humble monastery nestled within a small village, there was a disciple who drew attention, but not in the way you might think. Among the monks who meditated and practiced humility, he stood out, but it wasn't because of wisdom or inner peace. Instead, he became known for his endless chatter, his constant need to speak and be heard. Every day, he filled the monastery with stories, often bragging about his wealthy upbringing, a background he reminded everyone of at every chance he got. He'd boast about the luxuries he had left behind for a simple life, painting himself as noble, someone who had sacrificed more than anyone else. He criticized and judged his fellow monks, thinking his background made him superior. It wasn't long before everyone knew his opinions, for he had one about almost everything. Reflecting on this, it makes me wonder, how often do we do the same? How many of us feel compelled to fill the air with our voices, to announce our importance, or to prove something to ourselves and others? In a way, this disciple held up a mirror to so many of us. He was constantly seeking validation, as though his words alone could confirm his worth. And aren't we all, at some point or another, guilty of this same impulse? Think about the times you found yourself in a conversation, not truly listening, but waiting for your turn to speak, eager to assert yourself or win approval. It's a common habit, an easy trap to fall into. We all long to be recognized, to be seen as important, intelligent, maybe even enlightened in our own way. But in the end, does all this talking really bring us closer to peace, or is it just a distraction from a deeper truth? This disciple's story makes us pause, challenging us to look beyond our desire to be heard and ask a more profound question. Could there be a strength, a quiet power, in letting go of this need? This is where the teachings of silence come into play, an ancient wisdom that can feel almost unnatural in a world that constantly urges us to speak up, to prove ourselves. This disciple is like all of us, afraid that in silence he might be invisible, unimportant. But as we'll see, the silence he resisted would be the very path to discovering who he truly was, a journey to self-awareness that he never anticipated. What if, instead of filling the air with words, we turned inward to truly understand what drives us to speak so much in the first place? This is the Buddhist secret we're about to explore, a path of silence, of looking inward to find truths that words often hide. And in a world that moves so fast, where every voice clamors to be heard, maybe it's the silence that will teach us something we could never find in sound. So as we follow this disciple's journey, let's consider our own lives and the moments we might need to step back, fall silent, and look within. The answers we seek might be waiting for us in that stillness. Observing this disciple's constant need to talk, his restlessness, and his eagerness to be seen and heard, the wise monk knew that words alone wouldn't reach him. He saw that this disciple needed more than just advice. He needed an experience, a challenge that would reveal a deeper truth. So, in a calm and knowing tone, the monk presented him with an unusual task. For 1 entire month, remain silent, not a single word. Just observe, listen, and stay within yourself. At first, the disciple laughed, almost scoffing. Silence. For someone so self-assured, who believed himself disciplined and wise, this sounded easy. He saw it as a task beneath him, something simple that wouldn't even challenge his willpower. 1 month of silence. If that's all you ask of me, I'll do it without hesitation, he replied, full of confidence. To him, silence was merely the absence of sound, something he could control by simply closing his mouth. Little did he know that this journey would test him in ways he'd never imagined. It's easy to see how he could underestimate such a challenge, isn't it? After all, silence may seem like nothing more than refraining from speech, a simple act of restraint. But think about it. What if you couldn't speak for an entire month? In today's world, where constant communication surrounds us, where we text, call, post, and respond almost every minute of the day, could we even handle silence like that? For many of us, silence is uncomfortable, unnatural. It's in our conversations, our social media, and our daily interactions where we often find our sense of identity and purpose. To go without it, even for a day, might feel like stepping into a void, a space so quiet that we're left alone with nothing but our thoughts. Imagine then what a month of silence might reveal. How many of us, like the disciple, would feel that initial burst of confidence, thinking silence is easy? And yet, in the quiet, without the distraction of words, we would likely begin to confront parts of ourselves that we've long ignored. In silence, there's no place to hide, no one to validate our thoughts or soothe our insecurities. It's just us, alone with our inner voices. As we'll soon see, the disciple's journey into silence wasn't at all what he expected. It's a reminder for all of us that silence is more than the absence of sound. It's a presence, a space that allows us to meet ourselves in a way that words and noise cannot. And maybe, in that space, we might find answers to questions we didn't even know we had. So ask yourself, could you, in a world that never stops talking, embrace a month of silence? Would it bring peace, or would it uncover something deeper, something you might have been avoiding all along? This is the power and mystery of silence, a Buddhist secret that we're about to explore. In just a few days, the disciple's confidence began to waver. At first, silence had seemed so easy, even laughable, but now he felt something strange growing inside. A weight, a heaviness he couldn't ignore. With no one to talk to, his thoughts seemed to grow louder, like a rising tide of anxieties he couldn't control. Each passing hour brought new waves of restlessness. He'd never been left alone with his thoughts like this, and he began to feel an unease he couldn't shake. The quiet that had seemed so simple on the surface now felt suffocating, almost as though it were pressing in on him, magnifying every insecurity, every doubt he'd been carrying without realizing. Without the usual outlet of speech, he had nowhere to release these thoughts. They swirled in his mind, unrelenting, revealing memories, judgments, fears, and questions he hadn't even known were there. He was suddenly face to face with parts of himself that he'd always avoided. It was like looking into a mirror that showed not just his face, but his inner world, one filled with unresolved emotions, old wounds, and hidden worries. The silence was beginning to feel like a mirror that didn't let him turn away. This is where the journey of silence begins for many of us. When we quiet the external noise, we often think we're entering peace, but in truth, the noise just moves inward. We live in a world where conversation, social media, and constant communication fill our days, giving us endless ways to avoid facing our own minds. Every word we speak, every story we tell, becomes a kind of shield, a way to look outward rather than within. But true silence strips that shield away. In the quiet, we find ourselves face to face with everything we've pushed aside. It's no wonder then that many people fear silence. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of everything we've left unspoken inside ourselves. the disciples' struggle reminds us that silence isn't just about not talking. It's about listening to the voices within. Many of us, if we're honest, keep ourselves busy, even overwhelmed, to avoid these very moments. We use conversation to escape our own thoughts, filling the air so we don't have to confront what lies beneath. But true peace, the kind that lasts, comes only when we face those hidden parts of ourselves, when we allow the quiet to bring them to the surface. So, imagine yourself in the disciples' place, alone in silence, with nothing but your own mind. Could you sit with it, letting every thought, every feeling rise up without running from it? This is the heart of the Buddhist secret we're exploring, a path that leads us to face our inner world, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. The power of silence isn't in the quiet itself, but in what it reveals, truths about ourselves that words could never show. And only when we face those truths can we begin to find a deeper, more lasting peace. Desperate for some kind of peace, the disciple decided to retreat even further, leaving the monastery behind and wandering deep into the forest. He thought that maybe, just maybe, if he surrounded himself with the silence of nature, he could finally quiet his mind. In his heart, he hoped that the forest's serenity, the rustling leaves, the gentle sounds of birds, the whisper of the wind, would calm the turmoil that had taken over his thoughts. So he walked deeper and deeper, far from any human voice, into a world untouched by his anxieties. But as he ventured further, he discovered something unsettling. The silence outside didn't bring the peace he'd imagined. In fact, the deeper he went into the forest's quiet, the louder his thoughts seemed to grow. Every unresolved fear, every insecurity, every fragment of doubt seemed to echo through his mind, louder than any sound around him. It was as if the silence of the forest became a stage, amplifying his inner voice rather than soothing it. The more he tried to escape, the more he found himself confronted by the chaos within. His mind, without the familiar distractions of daily life, felt like it was spiraling, bringing him face to face with the noise he had carried all along. This part of the story resonates deeply. So many of us have felt this urge to escape, to run to places of peace, whether that's nature, a quiet room, or a retreat from our daily routines, thinking that by changing our surroundings, we'll find the calm we crave. But what we often don't realize is that we carry our inner world with us wherever we go. We can leave the noise of the city or the constant conversations around us, but if we don't confront our own inner clutter, it will follow us. Peace isn't just the absence of sound or busyness. It's the result of clearing the chaos within ourselves, facing what we've been avoiding. In silence, we see our true selves. It strips away the distractions and leaves us with the raw reality of our own minds. And that can be unsettling. It's why silence is such a powerful yet challenging practice in Buddhism. It forces us to confront not just the world outside, but the one within. For the disciple, the forest was a mirror, showing him that silence is not just about removing external noise, but clearing the mental clutter we carry. It's a reminder to all of us that true peace isn't found by escaping our world. It's cultivated by facing and transforming the world within us. So, as we follow the disciples' journey, let's reflect on our own. What parts of our minds might grow louder in silence? What are the unresolved fears, anxieties, and insecurities we carry with us? And what would happen if we truly sat with them, allowing silence to be the space where we finally confront them? This is the Buddhist secret at the heart of this story. Peace is found not by running away, but by finding stillness within, even when that stillness brings us face to face with what we'd rather avoid. Days passed, slowly turning into weeks, and with each passing day, the disciples' inner voices began to soften. It wasn't an immediate transformation. There were still echoes of thoughts, lingering questions, and faint traces of the restlessness he had carried. But as time wore on, those once overwhelming voices began to fade, like ripples settling on the surface of a pond after a stone is thrown. In the heart of the forest, where only nature surrounded him, he reached a point he hadn't anticipated. True, unforced inner peace. No longer was he trapped in the labyrinth of his mind. Instead, he found himself tuning into the sounds around him. the whispering leaves, the rustling of branches, the gentle hum of life that filled the forest. Slowly, his attention shifted from his own thoughts to the beauty of the world surrounding him. For the first time, he wasn't listening to his own mind. He was truly hearing the sounds of nature. The disciple had reached a state of presence, an awareness that allowed him to experience each moment with a quiet mind and an open heart. This part of his journey reminds me of a saying, "Only when the mind quiets down can we hear the world around us." Silence, in its truest form, isn't just the absence of words or thoughts. It's an elevated state of awareness, a clarity that so many of us have lost. In our noisy, fast-paced lives, we often forget what it feels like to experience the world fully. Our minds are so crowded with thoughts, plans, and worries that we rarely take the time to listen, to truly be present. But when the mind is still, the world comes alive in ways we've never noticed before. Imagine what it would be like to experience such silence. Not a forced or empty quiet, but a silence that comes naturally from within. A silence that allows you to hear the smallest details, the gentle rhythms of life, the subtle beauty we usually overlook. It's a kind of peace that most of us have only glimpsed, a tranquility that feels foreign in a world constantly pulling us in every direction. The disciple's journey teaches us that silence is not just an escape from sound, but a gateway to deeper awareness, a way to reconnect with the world around us in its purest form. What if we could all learn to quiet our minds in this way, to reach a state where we could experience life fully, without the distractions of endless thoughts and worries? Perhaps this is the essence of the Buddhist Secret, a path that invites us to go beyond the noise of our minds and discover a world of clarity, a presence that fills us with peace. So, as we continue to explore this story, let's remember that silence isn't about closing ourselves off. It's about opening ourselves up to a level of awareness we may have forgotten, a peace that lets us see and hear life in all its richness. After several long months, the disciple finally returned to the monastery, but he was not the same person who had left. Gone was the restless energy, the constant need to be heard, the eagerness to prove himself. Instead, he moved with a calm grace that seemed to radiate from within. His gaze was steady, his steps deliberate, and every word he spoke felt as if it carried weight, each one carefully chosen. He no longer filled the air with stories or boasted about his background. He simply spoke when he needed to, and when he did, his words had a quiet power. There was a profound sense of peace about him, a serenity that others could feel in his presence. It was as if silence had stripped away everything unnecessary, leaving only the essence of who he truly was. He had discovered something in those quiet months that changed him on a fundamental level, something that words could never fully capture. Now, each word he spoke was intentional, imbued with a sense of clarity and purpose. The disciple had learned not only the value of silence, but the beauty of speaking sparingly, letting each word resonate with meaning. His transformation was unmistakable, and those who knew him before could sense it instantly. This was not just a change in behavior, it was a shift in his entire being. It's fascinating to see how silence reshapes us when we let it in. In a world where we often speak without thinking, where words are thrown around carelessly, silence teaches us a different way. It makes us more intentional, more attuned to the impact of what we say. The disciple's journey illustrates this beautifully. By embracing silence, he had become someone who no longer needed to prove himself with words. He had found a strength within that no amount of talking could provide. Imagine the transformation we might undergo if we too embraced moments of silence in our own lives. It's easy to fill the space around us with words, to use them as a shield, a way to navigate through the world. But silence, when we truly embrace it, brings us closer to our essence. It invites us to listen, not only to others, but to ourselves, to the quiet wisdom that often gets drowned out in our busy lives. This story reminds us that silence isn't an absence, it's a presence, one that has the power to change us deeply. When we allow silence into our lives, we become more mindful, more connected to our intentions. Each word we choose to say, or not say, becomes more meaningful. Perhaps this is the true Buddhist secret. In the quiet, we don't just find peace, we find ourselves. The monk, observing the disciples' transformation, gently shared a final lesson. He explained that speaking too much, without thought or purpose, not only drains our energy, but also distances us from ourselves. Each word we say carries a part of our energy, and the more we talk without intention, the more scattered we become. It's like emptying ourselves, bit by bit, until we lose touch with who we really are. True peace, the monk shared, is found in a balance, a harmony between speaking wisely and listening deeply. This isn't just about conserving energy, it's about nurturing a connection with our own inner world. When we speak with purpose, each word becomes a reflection of our true self. And when we listen, we open ourselves to wisdom and understanding that we can't hear when we're constantly focused on being heard. In a world that thrives on endless chatter, learning to be silent may be one of the most valuable skills we can develop. Silence gives us space to observe, to feel, and to understand life on a deeper level. It's a way to reconnect with ourselves, to conserve the energy we so often spill into meaningless conversations, and to feel the richness of each moment without needing to fill it with sound. Silence, then, is not emptiness. It's a presence, a state of awareness that allows us to understand ourselves and the world around us in ways we may have forgotten. Think about it. Every moment of silence is a choice, a chance to step back from the noise and rediscover what's truly important. It's not about suppressing our voices or refusing to communicate. It's about choosing when and how to speak, so our words carry purpose and depth. Perhaps the real power lies not in what we say, but in the silence we choose. Because in that silence, we find a strength, a clarity, and a peace that can't be found in any amount of words. As we end this story, consider this as a challenge in your own life. What would happen if you embraced silence just a little more each day? Could it bring you closer to a deeper understanding of yourself? Could it help you connect more meaningfully with others? This is the essence of the Buddhist secret, a wisdom that invites us to find the answers we seek, not by adding more, but by finding peace in less. So, as you move forward, remember the power of silence and the strength it holds within.